the family is supposed to point children and others to God. So I want to start by saying this statement that the family is a reflection, or supposed to be a reflection, of God's perfection. And what I mean by that is that the family in itself is a metaphor for what the relationship between Christ and his church looks like. And in so doing, is supposed to reflect what God's relationship with his people looks like. And here's what I mean by that. Often we hear and read metaphors in the Bible around Christ and his relationship to the church. It's often described as a marriage relationship, a bride and a bridegroom. So that children, when they're growing up in a family, they're supposed to be able to look at their parents and see the love and the care the father has for the mother, or rather the husband has for the wife. It's supposed to see the provision, the authority, the love, the servanthood that the husband should have with regard to his wife and his family. And over time, the parent should be able to say, look, son or daughter, you see how I treat your mother? You see how I run the family? This is what God's love looks like for his people. This is what Christ's love looks like for his church. And when we're able to do that, they're able to get a more profound understanding of who God is. And they can move from their dependence upon their parents to a deeper understanding and dependence upon God and Christ himself. And that's how it's supposed to work. But then what happens when there's a breakdown in that family? What happens when there is divorce? What happens when there's abuse? What happens when there are so many other negative things happening in that person's life that a different truth is established? When I was younger, and I think I've described this in my other videos, like my family got broken, right? Period. My parents divorced. It was a very, very trying time for me. And, because of the age in which it happened and the instability I experienced, the metaphor of family meant nothing to me as it pertained to God. So, my mom would bring us to church all the time, and I hear about God being the Father. That meant very little to me because my father wasn't present the way I needed him to be. Mind you, I love my dad. We talk every so often now, and I respect him, and I appreciate the lessons he did teach me. But the divorce and everything that happened during that period really hurt my image of what father meant. Right? Father wasn't present for me. Right? Where God the Father is ever present. But I would never know that because my dad wasn't present the way I needed him to be. And then we also look at, the fact that my father wasn't there. I could never see how he's supposed to treat my mother. So when we look at the Bible and we look at the idea of Christ, looking after his church, or the bride groom looking after the bride, I was never there to witness that. So I never had a profound understanding of what that relationship was supposed to be. So God was never attractive to me during that period. So when my mother would try to teach me about God, bring me to church and so forth, never had any interest because the family that was supposed to point me to Christ wasn't present. Mind you, it's not the only thing that's supposed to point me, but it is a very important part in how it's supposed to work. And it's to emphasize that point when we read Deuteronomy chapter 6. Starts out from the gate. It says that the parents are supposed to teach their children along the way, speak about God at the dinner table, write it on their doorposts, and so forth and so on. So again, it is emphasizing the family is that crucial and pivotal place to learn about God, and therefore learn about oneself. All right, I'm gonna say that one again. The family is a place where someone's supposed to learn about God and therefore themselves, because we are made in the image of God. So that if that image is blurred in any way, we lose the ability to see who we are supposed to be. So for me, in that breakdown, I could no longer see who I was supposed to be. Therefore, I was very incredibly insecure. Didn't know what it meant to be a man. Didn't know who I was, where I was going with my life. For a very long time, I experienced a lot of depression. It's like going to a new country, not knowing what country it is without a map. You don't know where to go, who to turn to, what street you're on, don't know how to speak the language. You're just kind of wandering, and whatever happens to you, wherever you end up, you end up. Rather than knowing exactly where you are, where you're going, and what you're supposed to be doing. So, all that being said, question is, how do you come back from that? And I think if you watch my other videos, you'll know what I'm going to say. It's the Beatitudes. That's where community comes in. That's where someone comes into your life, or you could be that person that comes into someone else's life, and you demonstrate that love that they're supposed to have, right? You demonstrate that love and that forgiveness and that patience that person should have received while in the family. And you do that by being like Christ and pointing the person back to Christ. Christ is always the foundation of every teaching of everything, right? So even though my parents weren't able to demonstrate and teach me lessons that I should have learned, I was eventually pointed back to Christ, the originator, so that I can learn these things. So through Christ, I learned what it meant to be fathered and what it means to be a son. Let's say that again. Through Christ, I learned what it meant to be a father and to be fathered and to be a son. You know, when I read the Bible, and, you know, it says that God the Father sent his only son to die for my sins, in spite of who I was, in spite of what I've done, even before I was born. I felt the love that I should have received. I felt and understood the level of sacrifice a father should give to their children. And that was very powerful for me, because in my formative years, I felt like I was rejected, unwanted. I felt worthless because I felt like my father, my biological father, didn't want me and didn't love me the way I felt I deserved and needed to be loved. But knowing that there was a Father in heaven who could give me that love and who already gave me that love before I even knew who he was incredibly powerful and helped me to begin that journey into finding out who I am. You know, in Psalm 27, David has this one verse that I always appreciated, and that the verse was, even when my mother and my father forsake me, the Lord will take me up. And that verse always resonated for me, because at the time, I really felt like my family wasn't there for me. I felt like they failed me, they weren't present, and in fact, I realized that they could never be what I needed in the end. What I needed is Christ. And even amid the rejection and the worthlessness that I was feeling, God was always there. You know, it's beautiful. Like I felt like garbage, you know, like literal garbage. And he picked me up and treated me like a precious jewel and helped me to understand that I am precious, that I am important. And I was able to see those things because others outside of my family took the time to show me these things. So even when I was feeling that way about myself, they were able to demonstrate Christ's love by accepting me and showing me that I was worth loving in spite of everything. And in so doing, was able to point me to a greater love in Christ, because their love for me left me questioning why. You know, why would they sacrifice time? Why would they, you know, give that kind of time and give that kind of effort to little old worthless me. And that questioning eventually led me to Christ. They exemplified and lived out the Beatitudes. They were so humble. They were so kind. They were so loving. They really pushed hard with me in spite of my behavior, in spite of my rejecting them and pushing them away. They pushed back at me with Christ's love. And that, coupled with the unfailing love that my mother showed me through all these years, really eventually reminded me and pointed me back to Christ, and therefore back to who I am in Him. I was able to find out who I am, able to become more secure, able to be the man I am today because of their love. When family is unable to do the job of pointing one back to Christ, it is the community's job to be that family, to fill that gap, and to save people like me. And when I think about the people in this world who go through so much worse than I have been through, and their experiences around, being addicted to drugs, being sex trafficked, being physically abused over many years, being emotionally abused and insulted continually, people who experience over and over and over again such utter pain and rejection. How much more do they need us, believers, to push back with a love in the same or even more magnitude than the negativity that they've experienced? That's the only way people like them and like myself will ever find Christ, will ever find the truth, will ever find themselves and live out their full potential. I'm here today because someone chose to push with me. So I encourage you all to also push, to also love, and show that sacrificial love that Christ showed us so that we can be where we are today. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Take care and have an awesome day. Bye.